As the United States approaches the middle of the 21st century, the political landscape has become more fragmented than ever before. Many Americans are beginning to ask an unsettling question. Is the country heading towards some kind of internal conflict or even civil war? For some, this possibility may seem improbable or even extreme, but the increasing polarization within society, the resurgence of historical cycles of crisis and widening economic inequalities make this question more relevant with each passing year. If these deep divisions are not addressed, the consequences could be far-reaching and potentially devastating for the stability of the nation. Throughout American history, periods of tension and division have often been followed by moments of crisis. Today, the combination of hyper-partisanship between the right and the left, the frustrations over political inaction, and the societal divides exacerbated by economic disparity seem to be pushing the country toward an inflection point. In this video, we'll explore four major factors driving the United States toward a potential internal conflict: the extreme political polarization, the influence of 80-year and 250-year historical cycles, the growing economic inequalities, and the significant decline in birth rates. Each of these factors contributes to a growing sense of instability that, if left unchecked, could lead to internal strife. As we explore these pressing issues, it becomes clear that without urgent action to address the root causes of these divisions, the risks of internal conflict will only grow. The historical patterns, the ever-widening gap between the rich and poor, and the demographic shifts all suggest that the United States is facing a critical moment. The question remains, can we find common ground and avert the crisis? Or are we heading down a path of increasing discord and potential civil unrest? The stakes are high, and the choices we make in the coming years will determine the future of the nation. Political polarization and the bureaucratic deadlock. In recent years, the political divide in the United States has grown sharper and more profound than at any point in modern history. Today, the ideological gap between the left and the right feels almost unbridgeable. Issues such as immigration, healthcare, gun rights, and the role of government have become flashpoints for conflict, with both sides firmly entrenched in their beliefs. Compromise seems increasingly out of reach, and any attempts at bipartisan solutions are often met with suspicion or outright hostility. This polarization, which manifests in everything from social media discourse to national policy debates, isn't merely a social phenomenon, it has become deeply embedded in the political system itself. What's worse, the political gridlock is not just the result of ideological differences, but is also reinforced by the very bureaucratic structures that were meant to provide balance. In theory, the bureaucracy serves as a neutral body that ensures the smooth functioning of government regardless of political shifts. But in reality, it often acts as a roadblock to meaningful reform. According to political theorist Samuel T. Francis in his book The Leviathan and Its Enemies, the modern bureaucratic state has evolved into a self-serving entity that resists change, even when change is desperately needed. Rather than working to solve pressing issues, the bureaucracy works to protect its own interests, entrenching its power and becoming increasingly insulated from the concerns of ordinary citizens. This leads to widespread frustration and a sense of powerlessness among the populace. As both the left and the right dig deeper into their ideological positions, the chances of meaningful cooperation diminish. This lack of compromise has paralyzed Congress, state legislatures, and local governments, leaving critical issues unresolved. Major problems, such as healthcare reform, immigration policy, and gun control, remain in a perpetual state of debate without any tangible solutions. The growing distrust between these groups, along with the increasing perception that the government is either incapable or unwilling to act, has only deepened the divisions. The more dysfunctional the political system appears, the more disillusioned and angry the populace becomes. If this political deadlock continues, the risk of internal conflict will increase. As the system fails to deliver meaningful results, both sides of the political spectrum are increasingly viewing the bureaucracy and the government as illegitimate or ineffective. In this atmosphere of growing polarization and distrust, the seeds of conflict are being planted. If a significant crisis emerges, whether it's economic, political, or social, the inability of the government to act decisively could exacerbate the divisions and lead to widespread unrest. The risk isn't just gridlock, it's the erosion of faith in the democratic process itself, making internal conflict a frighteningly real possibility. The historical cycles of conflict. To understand where the United States might be headed, it's essential to look back at history. Societies often experience cyclical patterns of growth, stability, crisis, and renewal, a phenomenon that has been studied by scholars such as David Hackett Fischer in his book The Great Wave and William Strauss and Neil Howe in The Fourth Turning. According to Strauss and Howe, history moves in roughly 80-year cycles, or the span of a human life. These cycles are broken into 4 phases: high, awakening, unraveling, and crisis. Each phase represents a specific stage in societal development, ranging from periods of stability to moments of extreme tension and upheaval. Societies grow, face internal challenges, and ultimately must confront crises that redefine them. Currently, the United States appears to be entering the final phase of this cycle: crisis. According to the Fourth Turning theory, the last major crisis in the United States occurred during World War II, approximately 80 years ago. That conflict, like others before it, reshaped the nation and the global order. The theory suggests that we are now entering a new period of significant upheaval, similar to the crisis periods that have marked other turning points in history, such as the American Revolution or the Civil War. But this theory extends beyond just 80-year cycles. Looking at the broader span of 250-year cycles of empires, we find that the US is also nearing its 250th anniversary in 2026. Historically, empires that reach this age often face a critical point of transformation, either renewing themselves or facing decline. The US may be approaching such a moment of reckoning. The recurring theme in these historical cycles is that periods of crisis often bring about fundamental change. However, these changes can also lead to significant internal conflict. Societies that fail to adapt to the challenges presented during these crisis phases often experience civil wars or revolutions. The American Civil War and the upheaval during the Great Depression are clear examples of how economic and political turmoil can push a nation to the brink of collapse. What we are witnessing in the United States today, the economic inequality, political polarization, and rising societal tensions, may not be an anomaly. Instead, they could be part of this larger historical pattern, making the possibility of conflict more likely if we fail to take the lessons of history seriously. What history teaches us is that crises are inevitable, but how we respond to them is what determines a society's fate. The convergence of the 80-year and 250-year historical cycles suggests that the United States may be approaching a critical moment in its history. We have seen these cycles play out before, and they have led to moments of great upheaval and transformation. The question we must ask ourselves is, will this be a time of renewal, where we find ways to resolve our deep divisions, or will we fall into the trap of conflict and discord that has marked so many periods of crisis in the past? Without learning from history, the chances of internal conflict grow ever more plausible. Massive economic inequality. Economic inequality in the United States has reached levels not seen since the Gilded Age of the late 19th century. While a small percentage of the population controls the vast majority of the country's wealth, millions of Americans struggle to afford basic necessities like healthcare, housing, and education. This growing income gap is another factor contributing to the tensions in the country. As economic inequality continues to widen, the social contract begins to fray. Many Americans feel left behind by an economy that seems to benefit only the wealthy. The middle class, once the backbone of American society, is shrinking, and the working class is being squeezed. This kind of inequality creates fertile ground for populist movements, as we've seen throughout history. When people feel that the system is rigged against them, they often turn to radical solutions, sometimes resulting in revolutionary change or violent upheaval. Without addressing the growing wealth disparity, the United States risks further internal division. If large segments of the population continue to feel disenfranchised and powerless, the likelihood of widespread civil unrest increases. Economic inequality has often been a precursor to internal conflicts throughout history, and the US may be no exception if this trend continues. Declining birth rates and the aging population. Another major factor contributing to America's internal instability is the plummeting birth rate. Birth rates in the United States have declined steadily over the past few decades, with fewer young people entering the workforce and a growing elderly population. This demographic shift puts enormous strain on social services, healthcare, and the economy. Historically, nations with declining birth rates often face economic stagnation and social upheaval. As fewer young people are available to support an aging population, the burden on social programs grows, leading to potential conflicts over resources and economic opportunities. At the same time, an aging population tends to be more conservative, while younger generations push for progressive change. This generational divide adds another layer of tension to an already polarized society. If birth rates continue to decline and the gap between generations widens, the US may face more internal strife over how to allocate resources, manage the economy, and address the needs of its citizens. Societies that fail to address these demographic challenges often find themselves weakened and more vulnerable to internal conflict. The need for unity to avoid conflict. As the United States stands at a crossroads, the future may be uncertain, but one truth remains clear. Without deliberate efforts to heal the deep divisions within the country, the risk of internal conflict will continue to grow. The combination of factors we've explored, political polarization, the cyclical nature of history, growing economic inequality, and demographic shifts, suggests that the US is approaching a critical moment. These forces are converging, and if we fail to find ways to address them, the likelihood of civil unrest or even worse, civil war, becomes more than just a distant possibility. If we continue on the current path of infighting and entrenchment, the very foundations of democracy could be shaken. However, history does not offer only bleak outcomes. In times of crisis, the United States has shown remarkable resilience. Moments of intense internal conflict, whether it be the struggles of the Civil War, the turbulence of the Great Depression, or the societal upheavals of the 1960s, have in the end led to periods of renewal. These moments of division and uncertainty were ultimately met with solutions rooted in unity and the desire for a better future. The lesson from history is that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, societies can find ways to come together, confront the issues at hand, and emerge stronger on the other side. But this is not automatic. It requires action, dialogue, and a commitment to the common good. To avoid the darker paths that history has shown us, the US must embrace the power of dialogue and compromise. In a society as diverse and complex as ours, differences in opinion and ideology are inevitable. Yet if we continue to view one another as enemies rather than fellow citizens, we only weaken the nation from within. Polarization feeds conflict, but compromise fosters growth. Finding common ground doesn't mean abandoning deeply held beliefs. It means recognizing that the country's future depends on our ability to move forward together. It is through collective effort that we can begin to address the economic, social, and political inequalities that threaten the nation's stability. The United States has faced monumental challenges before, and each time it has found ways to heal and progress. But now, more than ever, we must remember the lessons of the past. It is only through unity, not division, that we can ensure a brighter future for all. As we move forward, we must ask ourselves, Will we allow history to repeat its most tragic moments, or will we work to avoid the conflicts that have torn apart nations before us? The answer lies in the choices we make today. Only through understanding, dialogue, and a commitment to the common good can we chart a path toward peace and stability, ensuring that the United States remains a beacon of hope and democracy for generations to come.